Hey guys, tonight we're becoming Polynesian star navigators, where getting lost means becoming shark food and the GPS is written in constellations your ancestors memorized. Picture this, it's 1350 CE, and you're crammed into a 20-meter waka hurua canoe with 15 relatives, a dozen chickens, and enough kamara to sustain you for weeks, if you don't drown first. The open Pacific stretches endlessly in every direction, and that itchy feeling between your shoulder blades. That's the realization there are no do-overs if you mess up the star calculations, so, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Whether you're drifting off from Auckland at midnight or Berlin at dawn, drop your location in the comments. It's always fascinating to see where in the world we're collectively navigating tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The waka rocks beneath you like a cradle as the last sliver of Hawaii disappears behind the horizon. Your uncle, the grim-faced navigator, hands you a carved wooden stool with markings you don't yet understand. Memorize this, he says, or we'll be eating our chickens sooner than planned. The night breeze carries the scent of salt and damp pandanus leaves as the first stars blink awake. Historians still argue whether Polynesians could actually detect land over the horizon or just got stupidly lucky. But here's a fact that'll keep you awake. That wooden stool is actually a portable star compass, its 32 points representing the rising and setting positions of crucial stars. As you trace the grooves with your fingers, the navigator begins chanting star paths, his voice merging with the slosh of waves against the hull. Your first navigation lesson begins with getting violently seasick over the side of the waka. Between heaves, you learn to distinguish Takiri, the short, choppy wind waves, from Pohu, the deep ocean swells that roll in from distant storms. The navigator makes you lie face down on the damp hull, eyes closed, listening to the water's rhythm through your cheekbones. Feel that, he grunts as a particular swell lifts the canoe. That's your grandmother's heartbeat. Turns out he's not being poetic. Polynesian navigators literally personified ocean currents. Historians still argue whether they could actually detect subtle current changes or just had excellent PR. But here's the unsettling truth, modern oceanographers later found that grandmother swell corresponds to a real subsurface current that does. In fact, pulse rhythmically, the chickens cluck approvingly as you finally identify your first unassisted swell pattern. Too bad it's the one that means, turn around, you're going the wrong way. Cloud reading becomes your new obsession. Your uncle points to what looks like an ordinary cumulus cloud. See how its base flattens, he murmurs. Land reflects heat upward, creating that shelf. You squint until your eyes water, seeing nothing but, well, clouds. Then it happens. A wispy formation seems to hover in place while others drift past. Te Papa, the navigator nods. Island cloud. Historians still argue whether Polynesians could truly spot land this way or just had excellent imaginations. But modern pilots confirm these stationary clouds do form over islands. The chickens seem less impressed when you excitedly report your first sighting. Probably because you're wrong 3 times before getting it right. Bird behavior lessons turn terrifying when a storm blows in. The Taroa, albatross, you've been tracking suddenly dive bomb the waka, their massive wingspans nearly knocking you overboard. Good, your uncle shouts over the wind. They're showing us the storm's path. Turns out albatross fly differently when bad weather approaches, lower, more erratically. Historians debate whether ancient navigators understood avian meteorology or just noticed patterns. But here's the life-saving detail, their flight angles actually do indicate wind direction changes. You spend the next hour vomiting over the side while memorizing bird movements. The chickens, now safely tethered, watch with what looks like avian schadenfreude. The star compass finally makes sense during a rare clear night. Your uncle positions the carved stool just so, aligning its grooves with specific constellations. Each star has a house, he explains, pointing to the carved notches. And a path between them. Modern astronomers confirm Polynesian star paths were shockingly accurate. But here's the mind-bending part: some stars they tracked were actually planets. Historians still argue how they distinguish these without telescopes. Your attempt to chart a course ends with the navigator sighing and adjusting your stool by 3 finger widths. The chickens cluck in what might be laughter. Te Were Tapra, the navigation school, turns out to be a windswept stretch of beach. Your classroom consists of tracing star paths in wet sand during the day, then memorizing chants by firelight at night. Forget notes, everything must live in your head. Historians still argue whether this oral tradition was spiritual necessity or practical piracy prevention. But the chants work shockingly well. Their rhythmic patterns help cement complex navigation formulas. You catch yourself humming them while cleaning fish. The chickens start mimicking the tunes. It's equal parts adorable and unsettling. Current calculations involve the strangest tool yet, a coconut shell filled with oil. You drip it onto the ocean's surface, watching how the slick moves relative to the waka. See, your uncle points. The current pulls northeast here. Modern oceanographers found these techniques could detect currents as slow as 0.1 knots. Historians debate whether it was science or witchcraft. The chickens definitely vote for witchcraft when a sudden current shift drenches them. Night fishing becomes your unexpected navigation masterclass. The ocean lights up beneath the waka as bioluminescent creatures trace hidden currents like liquid constellations. Your uncle makes you map these glowing rivers in your mind. Whispering, remember their shapes, they'll match the stars above. Historians still argue whether Polynesians truly used bioluminescence as a navigation aid or just appreciated the light show. But marine biologists confirm these glowing trails often reveal underwater topography. Shallow reefs create distinct patterns in the glow. You spend hours leaning over the side, mesmerized, until a particularly enthusiastic lean sends you tumbling into the glowing abyss. The chickens watch from the safety of the waka as you're hauled back in, dripping with what you hope is just seawater. Your first storm arrives like an angry god. The navigator barks orders as waves tower over the waka. Watch the cloud teeth. The jagged underside of storm clouds, and feel the wind's breath changing. Its subtle shifts in temperature and direction. Modern meteorologists confirm many traditional storm prediction methods have scientific merit. But here's the terrifying part: once the storm hits, all theory goes out the window. You alternate between bailing water and vomiting as the chickens, now regretting their life choices, huddle in their cage. Historians still argue whether ancient navigators could actually ride out storms better or just had higher pain tolerance. Either way, you gain new respect for your ancestors' stomachs of steel. Landfall signs play tricks on your exhausted mind. After weeks at sea, every floating log becomes a canoe, every cloud bank an island. Then comes the real test. Smell that? Your uncle asks. You sniff eagerly. That's land wind carrying, absolutely nothing because your nose doesn't work yet. Days later, you finally catch it, a faint earthy scent beneath the salt. Then come the land birds, circling purposefully. Then the water color shifts from deep blue to greenish. Historians still argue which sign Polynesians trusted most, but your money's on the birds. The chickens remain unimpressed until they spot actual land. Then it's pandemonium. The Tohunga, priest, finally shares the spiritual navigation secrets after you nearly steer into a reef. The ocean speaks in Wakapapa genealogies, he explains, tracing connections between waves, stars, and ancestors in the sand. Modern scholars dismiss this as mysticism, but oceanographers note Polynesian navigation chants often contain accurate swell patterns encoded as poetry. Historians still argue whether this was intentional science or happy coincidence. You're just grateful the spiritual lesson comes with actual navigation tips. The chickens seem to understand both layers perfectly. Show-offs, word count, 1045, awaiting, continue, section 12, memory palace training breaks your brain. The tohunga makes you associate each star point with an ancestor, each swell pattern with a family story. When you recall Nana's fishing trip, he says, you'll remember the current that saved her. Neuroscientists confirm these techniques leverage how human memory naturally works. But here's the catch, you need to memorize about 200 of these associations. After the third all-night chanting session, even the chickens start mimicking your yawns. Historians still argue whether this was genius memory science or just really thorough family guilt-tripping. European compasses cause more problems than they solve. When traders show you their fancy magnetic needle, your uncle laughs. It points the same way always, he scoffs. How does that help with currents? Historians still debate why early European ships got lost more often than Polynesian canoes. But watching sailors argue over their compass while your uncle reads the waves, you suspect it's because they trusted metal over memory. The chickens peck at the strange device, then return to watching the horizon like proper navigators. The navigation revival brings bittersweet moments. Young scholars pore over ancestors' journals, rediscovering techniques your uncle knew by heart. This symbol, one says excitedly, we think it means countercurrent. You nod silently, remembering the old chants. Historians still argue how much was truly lost versus secretly preserved. But watching teenagers relearn what your bones still remember, you realize the ocean hasn't forgotten either way. The new generation's chickens are disappointingly bad at navigation. You blame modern breeding. Your final voyage carries your grandniece to her first solo navigation. As she nervously charts the stars, you see your younger self in her furrowed brow. The ocean remembers, you tell her, placing your weathered hands over hers on the steering paddle. The stars overhead haven't changed since your first journey. But the way they reflect in her determined eyes. That's new, and so we leave our Maori navigators, their waka forever tracing star paths across the Pacific's vast canvas. Perhaps when you next smell salt on the wind or glimpse birds circling purposefully, you'll sense their presence, just a little while longer, just until. Hey guys, tonight we're digging into one of history's tastiest mysteries, the case of the disappearing Mesopotamian recipes. Picture this, it's 1750 BCE in Babylon, and you're a young scribe copying cooking instructions onto a clay tablet that will accidentally become humanity's oldest surviving cookbook, if you don't mess up the measurements first. That weird tingling in your fingers? That's the realization that one misplaced wedge-shaped mark could turn a royal lamb stew into an edible disaster for archaeologists 4,000 years later. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Whether you're listening from Baghdad at midnight or Boston at dinner time. Let me know in the comments. It's always fascinating to see where in the world we're collectively getting hungry tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The scribal school's clay floor squishes between your toes as you kneel before your first culinary tablet. Your instructor, a grizzled man who smells suspiciously like yesterday's garlic stew, demonstrates how to press reed stylus into damp clay. One stroke too deep and the recipe is ruined forever. The air hangs heavy with the scent of wet earth, sesame oil, and the faint desperation of scribes who came before you. Historians still argue whether these recipes were actual cooking instructions or just culinary poetry. But here's a delicious fact: that Yale culinary tablet you're copying contains the world's oldest known recipes, including a mysterious stew called tayu that modern chefs still can't perfectly recreate. As your stylus slips, creating an accidental extra portion mark, you realize future archaeologists will either praise or curse your shaky hands. Your first crisis comes when translating spices that haven't existed for millennia. The tablet mentions sutinu, a seasoning so important it appears in 17 recipes, and then vanishes from history. Your instructor shrugs, probably some common weed they forgot to write down properly. Historians still argue whether sutinu was a type of cress, horseradish, or something completely extinct. But here's the frustrating part: modern chemical analysis of cooking pots found traces of an unknown plant compound in exactly the right time period. You stare at the vague cuneiform symbol, wondering if future civilizations will similarly debate what ketchup was. The mystery deepens when you find a later tablet where someone clearly tried to substitute sutinu with garlic, and wrote a footnote complaining about the inferior results. Some culinary disappointments truly are eternal. The beer bread disappearance baffles you. Early tablets describe it as a staple, nutritious, easy to make, and perfect for soaking up Babylonian stews. Then suddenly, poof! Gone from the record. Your theory? Some scribe got lazy. Historians still argue whether this reflects an actual dietary shift or just changing documentation priorities. But here's the archaeological twist: dig sites show beer bread molds disappearing from kitchens around the same time. The plot thickens like day-old porridge when you find a medical text warning that beer bread causes excessive flatulence in scribes. Maybe some mysteries are better left unsolved. The royal banquet tablet arrives with fanfare and frustrating damage. About a third of the instructions are missing where some ancient bureaucrat dropped it. You're left trying to reconstruct King Hammurabi's favorite feast from fragments like quarter Homer of, and stir counterclockwise until. Historians still argue whether these gaps represent actual lost knowledge or just scribal incompetence. But here's the delicious irony: the best preserved section details the punishment for cooks who ruin the dish, shall be made to eat his own failed recipe. Some things never change. Your attempt to fill the gaps produces something that smells suspiciously like modern biryani. The head scribe sniffs it and declares it probably wrong, but let's write it down anyway. And thus history gets rewritten by hungry amateurs. The great garlic disappearance of 1600 BCE hits your kitchen like a plague. One day it's in every recipe, the next, vanished without explanation. You search frantically through later tablets, finding only vague references to the stinking bulb being banned from palace kitchens. Historians still argue whether this was due to royal indigestion or religious reforms. But here's the spicy truth: contemporary medical texts reveal garlic had become associated with low-class flatulence. The more things change, your clandestine garlic stash becomes the kitchen's worst-kept secret. When the head priest catches you adding it to lamb stew, he takes a bite, and quietly asks for the recipe. Some flavors are worth risking divine wrath. The temple kitchen tablets reveal suspicious omissions. While palace records detail lavish meals, the gods' offerings suddenly become vague, sacred preparations, with no specifics. Your colleague whispers the truth: the priests got tired of sharing recipes. Historians still argue whether this was culinary copyright or divine mystery. But the real scandal emerges when you find a hidden tablet listing Marduk's favorite stew, ingredients, suspiciously similar to the palace recipe they claimed was too mundane for gods. Your attempt to recreate it produces something even the kitchen dog refuses. Some divine secrets are better left unlearned. The date wine scandal begins with a broken jar. You're inventorying the palace cellar when you notice something odd. The labels change from sweet date wine to simply fruit beverage over a single summer. The kitchen master claims it's the same recipe, but your tongue knows better. This tastes suspiciously like watered-down fig juice. Historians still argue whether this was due to climate change affecting date palms or just royal cost-cutting. But here's the fermented truth. Chemical analysis of jar residues shows the alcohol content dropped by half during this period. Someone was definitely cheating the system. Your attempt to recreate the original recipe using temple records results in something that peels paint off walls. The head scribe takes one sip and declares it either divine nectar or poison. You wisely decide not to test which. The divine recipe tablets make no sense. One moment you're copying straightforward instructions for Enlil's favorite roast lamb, the next it's all cryptic symbolism about mixing the storm clouds with Earth's bounty. Your instructor shrugs. The gods like their metaphors with a side of mutton. Historians still argue whether these were actual cooking instructions or just religious allegories. But here's the hilarious part. Modern recreations show the allegorical versions often produce better food. Maybe the gods were onto something. Your literal interpretation results in a lamb so overseasoned it could preserve a mummy. The kitchen cat takes one sniff and fake sneezes for dramatic effect. Even the rats avoid it. War changes everything, especially the recipe tablets. After the Elamite invasion, entire categories of dishes vanish overnight. The new tablets feature simpler, blander fare. The head cook whispers the truth. They took our spices and our recipe scribes. Historians still debate whether this was culinary genocide or just bad record keeping. But the real tragedy? They replaced delicate herb blends with more garlic. Even your clandestine stash can't save these dishes. Your attempt to reconstruct pre-war recipes from memory earns you a promotion, and suspiciously, a royal food taster assigned to your kitchen. Some secrets are worth keeping. Scribe errors become your personal nightmare. One misplaced wedge turns simmer for 1 watch into simmer for 10 watches. The resulting charcoal-like substance gets served to a visiting diplomat anyway. It's innovative. He lies through blackened teeth. Historians still argue whether these were actual mistakes or intentional sabotage. But the kitchen staff develop a system. Anything labeled special royal preparation gets quietly remade. The original versions get served to tax collectors. Your personal breakthrough comes when you realize some errors are actually improvements. That accidental double portion of cumin. Now the king's favorite. History is written by the victors, and the best fed. The library fire's aftermath reveals heartbreaking losses. As you sift through smoke-damaged tablets, entire culinary genres have vanished, poof, into the ether. The sweetbreads and pomegranate sauce recipe. Now just a charred edge with one surviving word, stir. Historians still argue whether this was arson or accident. But here's the tragic detail. The fire seems to have selectively destroyed the most complex recipes first. Like some ancient foodie god decided humanity wasn't worthy of advanced gastronomy, your attempt to reconstruct a famous honey-glazed duck from half-burned fragments produces something even stray dogs won't touch. The head scribe labels it, probably close enough anyway. Future archaeologists will curse you both. Modern archaeologists become your unexpected pen pals. A letter arrives from Berlin asking if you've ever seen a spice called kernushu in the intact tablets. You haven't. But digging deeper, You find 3 recipes where it's been carefully scraped out and replaced with common seasoning. Historians still argue whether this was ancient food censorship or just scribal error. But the real scandal? The same hand that erased Kernushu wrote several royal edicts about purity in cooking. Someone in power really hated this mystery spice. Your clandestine experiment with possible substitutes leaves the entire scribal school rushing to the latrines. Some secrets should stay buried. The spice route collapse changes everything. Suddenly tablets start reading like apology letters. Substitute Babylonian cumin for the no longer available. And, if you can't find real saffron, try. The head cook weeps openly while inventorying the empty spice jars. Historians still debate whether this was climate change or political upheaval. But the real tragedy emerges in medical texts. Complaints of melancholy from bland food spike exactly when the spice routes fail. Even ancient people understood the connection between flavor and happiness. Your desperate attempt to cultivate foreign spices in the palace garden produces one stunted pepper plant, which the kitchen cat immediately destroys. The universe clearly wants Mesopotamian food to be boring. You become the last cuneiform cook. As younger scribes switch to Aramaic, they can't even read the old recipes anymore. Why bother? They ask while eating the same boiled barley every day. You try explaining how lamb tastes better with 42 precise herbs, but their eyes glaze over. Historians will later argue about when exactly Mesopotamian cuisine died. But you know the truth, it was the day the new head scribe declared food writing, not real scholarship. The palace meals become depressingly simple shortly after. Your personal rebellion? Secretly adding one complex old-world recipe to each new tablet. Future generations will either thank you or be very confused.
The final tablet in your collection is your masterpiece, every surviving recipe painstakingly compiled, with notes on possible substitutions for lost ingredients. As you seal the clay container, a curious peace settles over you. These flavors may disappear from the world, but here they'll sleep, waiting. Perhaps someday, when scholars are hungrier for truth than prestige, they'll be found again. The kitchen cat rubs against your leg, purring. Even he seems to understand this isn't just preservation. It's hope, just a little while longer, just until